Hi guys, my name is Nathan. I'm here today to talk to you about my two-wheel drive to four-wheel drive swapped 1997 Toyota 4Runner. So this is the truck right here. I bought this thing about 8 years ago. I've put about 110,000 miles on it since then. It's been my daily for the last about 3 years now. Got me through college and everything. I bought it as a 4-cylinder two-wheel drive 5-speed and is currently still a 4-cylinder. It's now 4-wheel drive. It has retained the 5-speed manual transmission, but now with a transfer case. I did this swap about 6 years ago, and it cost me about $2,500. There is a lot of speculation on this swap, and a lot of guys in the forums that'll say, hey, just sell your truck, buy a new one, and I'm here to tell you that is not the only option. I want to talk about how this swap might be right for you, what things about it might not be right, and if it's worth pursuing this swap yourself. So one of the things I want to start with is this video relevant to you or not? What I want to make really clear is that my truck, being a manual transmission, this swap was a lot easier. So if you have an automatic, you have maybe a 3-4 automatic two-wheel drive, this video might not be right. The main driver for that is that you have to swap the ECU. Toyota ECU prices can be pretty expensive. You could be looking up to $1,200 for the right one, and they can be a pain in the ass to find. So to make this video relevant, this helps if you have a manual transmission already. The other thing is if you have a 3-4 in a manual, this video will still be relevant. Everything's the same. You're just gonna have to buy the transmission for the 3-4 rather than the 3R. The front diff, the axles, everything like that will be the same. This also can be helpful for some of the first-gen Tacoma guys. There's some things that are different. I wouldn't praise this like it's the gospel. I wouldn't say it's exactly the same, but a lot of these parts are gonna be shared, so you can use this information to help with your swap. The biggest difference is with the other trims, extended cab, 4-door, the single cab, all the drive shaft dimensions might not be exactly the same, so that's something you're gonna wanna pay attention to if you're swapping a Tacoma rather than a 4Runner. Another thing that I did to save myself some time, save myself some hassle, is I actually swapped to a manual hub. This was standard on all the first-gen Tacomas. You could find first-gen Tacoma with these hubs, so these trucks can take it. If you're trying to do something where you have the automatic hubs, this swap is gonna cost a little bit more. So that's kind of one of the trade-offs of this swap, is you're kind of getting a simpler system, a simpler four-wheel drive. Personally, I like that better. Saves my CV axles, makes them last a little bit longer, but that's something you wanna consider. You know, if you want the creature comforts of a limited 4Runner, you're not gonna get that with this swap. This is very much gonna be a base model four-wheel drive truck. That's just something you have to consider. So, getting into our parts list, you're looking at a transmission, knuckles, hubs, brakes, axles, a differential, drive shafts, and possibly a re-gear. Not to mention any other extra parts you wanna do to maybe refresh your trim. You're gonna have the two-wheel drive trim. You might wanna swap to a four-wheel drive interior. That can cost some money. My personal cost for this was about $2,600 and about 2 weekends of my time. Didn't have the truck down for too long. I could actually swap in the transmission one weekend, not put the drive shaft in, diff in the next weekend, kind of slowly put this thing together. So I was able to daily drive the truck when I did this swap, but easily if you go pretty fancy, you want to get the trim right, you want to get a good re-gear, you want to do all that kind of stuff, you could easily push $3,500 to get this swap completed. So then you're gonna ask, well, where'd you get all those parts? So most of what I did was Rock Auto and then junkyards. So my transmission, my knuckles, my differential, those were all junkyard parts. I spent the extra money to have the transmission rebuilt, to have the differential rebuilt. My transmission cost at the end of the day was around $500. My differential cost was about $380. This was back in 2018, so you can expect your cost to be a little bit higher on those rebuilds. Maybe you decide to do them yourself. You know, maybe you decide not to rebuild your transmission. You can save yourself some money there. I had to re-gear my differential. This truck is a 410 in the rear. It can be really hard to find a 410 front differential. So I spent about $650 to re-gear my front end. I've heard some horror stories about your re-gear being up to $1,200. That's something you're gonna have to expect. You definitely have to get the gears right to each other. That's not something that's optional. So maybe you get lucky, find one that's geared the same as your rear. That can save yourself some money. Maybe your truck's already a little bit more common rear end differential. That's gonna help you out a lot. Another thing about most of my parts, especially if you're doing the manual hub, what you're going to be looking for is first gen Tacoma parts. The manual hubs did not come on a third gen 4Runner, so the knuckles, the hubs, everything, if you're going to Rock Auto buy them new, or if you're going to Junkyard to find them there, they're all going to be first gen Tacoma parts. So you're looking for a first gen Tacoma, not a third gen 4Runner. That's what a lot of people run into. Regarding your knuckles, regarding your hubs, I spent about $100 on Junkyard knuckles, and then I actually put in new wheel bearings, put in new calipers, put in new hubs. Total, that cost me about $300 for both sides. The manual hubs were $100 a piece, so about $250. Can be pretty expensive. You could save some money there by getting Junkyard manual hubs. They're fairly easy to rebuild. I find them difficult to actually source, so I thought it was easier to go just buy them new off Rock Auto. It's about $120 for a new one on Rock Auto right now, so about $250 for both. An opportunity to save money. I prefer to buy a new one. I've been running this swap for about 6 years. I've never had a problem with my hub. That's something that I decided is worth spending the money. I also, like I said, spent the money on all the wheel bearings. I haven't even had any problems with the truck the 6 years I've had them. The whole front end is super stout. Those are all things that I considered worth rebuilding. The other thing is you need CV axles. I bought those new as well. You're looking about $50 a piece on Rock Auto. Because I'm doing manual hubs, I can have the hub unlocked when I'm driving most of the time, transfer case in 2 high. My CV axles aren't spinning when I'm normally driving. This saves your CV axles a lot. I mean, all these guys running 3-inch, 4-inch lift, they're complaining about, hey man, I'm blowing up a CV axle every 3 months. Doing manual hubs, you don't have that problem. I thought that was something that was totally worth it. I still run high angle boots. That's something you should consider, especially if you're going the vacuum actuated route. That's the creature comfort, press a button, going 4-wheel drive. I would certainly run high angle boots to save your axles. You're gonna expect to blow them up still a little bit more. Manual hubs, I've only changed these axles out once in the 6 years that I've been 4-wheel drive. I think it's something that's totally worth it. So then, some common questions that I get on the forums about this swap is there any cutting you have to do, any drilling you have to do, anything like that? The only thing that I had to do, cut or drill, is I had to change out the cross member. Now I spent a little bit extra money and I got a trail gear cross member, it's an armored plate, 1/2 inch thick, thing's pretty beefy. I spent $250 on this back in 2018. You can actually cut one out of a junkyard truck, 4-wheel drive, put that one in your truck. That's the only place that I had to modify the truck at all. That's because I already had a manual transmission. Everything just bolted in. Now, when it comes to your differential, your CV axles, your hubs, everything just bolts right in. Now, it's important that you're buying the right hubs and knuckles and everything, because if you're doing manual hubs, not manual hubs, those are all specific, right? So I had to buy manual wheel bearings, manual hub wheel bearings, manual hub knuckles, manual hub hubs, everything to make that work. So that's the only thing, is you have to make your compatibility right. Other than that, everything bolts in. The holes for the diff, both of them, they're already in the frame of this truck. You just pop the diff in there, you're good to go. Drive shafts, same thing. I went to a local drive shaft shop here, had them actually made and balanced. That's why mine cost a little bit more, around $500 for those. But I didn't get any custom drive shaft. I didn't have to measure it. I just said, hey, I need the drive shafts for a 1997 4-wheel drive Tacoma with a 3RZ. They were good to go. That's all I had to do. So cutting, drilling, anything, this is a pretty low intensity swap. You're really just bolting parts in. If you can take anything off your truck and put it back on, you know how to change brakes, change your oil, you're probably gonna be okay. There's not a lot here that's all that complicated. If you're a little bit afraid of modifying the frame, or you're a little bit afraid of tentative there of, I'm gonna weld something on, all that kind of stuff, that's why it's a good reason to go for the trail gear cross member. That one, you just drill holes and bolt it on. Makes it really, really simple. So I don't think skill-wise, this would be something you're really afraid of. I mean, if you can change a transmission, you can do this one. It shouldn't be anything that scares anybody away. And certainly the amount of effort shouldn't shy you away from taking this on. So then, the last burning question, right? Is it worth it? So for me, it absolutely was. I bought this truck for about $6,000 with 90,000 miles on it, which is unheard of for 4Runners. It all depends on your market, right? I mean, a lot of people on the forums, a lot of people on Facebook when you're asking, hey, you know, how do you two-wheel drive swap this thing? They're gonna say, sell it, buy a new one, right? It all depends on your market. I'm up in Washington, you know, guys down in Colorado, they're really expensive to get this truck. I mean, you're talking 150, 200,000 miles for like 13, 14,000, you know, and sometimes you can find the two-wheel drive ones for under 10, you know, 7, 8, with relatively low miles, right? I think that's totally worth it. Maybe you're in an area where buying these 4Runners is a little bit easier. You know, you're down somewhere where it don't snow as much. Maybe you're over in the south, you know, it might not be worth it. That's just the reality. You know, it might actually be better just, you know, sell it, buy the 4-wheel drive truck, you know, one and done. Spend your money on a lift kit, something like that. You know, it all depends on the market that you're in. You know, up here where it's really competitive to get a 3rd generation 4Runner, I think it's totally worth it. You know, all those guys, they like to really big deal this swap, say, hey, you know, it's a total pain in the ass. I don't think it is. I don't even think it's that expensive. You know, I think it's totally worth the swap. It's worth the effort. And, you know, depending on the truck that you have, maybe you already have the 2-wheel drive truck. Maybe you're looking for one. You know, consider, maybe I'll just take on the swap. Things I'd shy away from this swap is if you have the automatic transmission, it's going to be a little bit more of a pain in the ass. You know, that's the reality. If you have a Tacoma, it's gonna be a little bit weirder to find out what all the right parts. You know, this video doesn't cover everything that you need to swap a 1st gen Tacoma, so that's something you're gonna wanna consider too. But, you know, if you have a 3rd gen 4Runner, low miles, 2-wheel drive, especially manual transmission, I think this is something that you should totally consider. You know, especially if you're okay, you know, running manual hubs. You know, I think that's something that's a huge advantage that a 2-wheel drive truck swap has that, you know, maybe a factory 4-wheel drive doesn't. So, you know, that's kind of my thoughts on this. I appreciate you guys watching. I ain't really a YouTuber. I just wanted to put out this information. Feel free to drop any questions you have in the comments. Hit me up on Facebook. You know, I'm happy to support this swap as best I can. Thanks for watching, guys.